Welcome to the Victorious Souls podcast with me, your host, Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com, that lady on the internet who loves you, connecting you to the love that heals so you can love yourself from survive to thrive. Today, I am delighted to have a guest with me that I had on my podcast in my first season when I was green as grass. And I'm just really excited to have him on again. Travis M. White. He calls himself a soul on fire, and we're going to talk about that. But through his coaching and writing and speaking, he helps people discover and overcome limiting beliefs. Those limiting beliefs that keep them from experiencing an epic life, which is also something we're going to get into. Thank you for being on the show with me again, Travis. We have so much to cover.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. Listeners, Travis was on 2 years ago, 2 years and 1 month, actually, to the day, because I was looking it up. And we're not going to rehash what we talked about back then. So if you want to hear his whole story, go to season 1, episode 62, and you can hear his whole story, because that was before he had a book, before he was a soul on fire, and all of that stuff. And I was green as grass. Like I said, I was new at this whole podcast thing. I didn't have bios for anybody. And you were new at what you were doing. You were working on your book at that time. So just give our listeners just a little bit of your background of what we did talk about before we move forward.
Yeah, well, I'm very passionate about that topic, even my struggles. So I'll try not to get stuck into retelling the whole story. But I am a trauma survivor and what I call also a survivor of my own trauma. I was sexually abused as a child, once at age 5, and then on and off for 3 years from 7 to 9. I went on like most kids, especially us guys, boys, thinking that it was past me and it wasn't going to hurt me anymore. And it took me a good chunk of my life to realize a lot of the struggles I had, drugs and alcohol in high school and college, other addictions, struggles with relationships until I met my amazing wife, was all due to the core beliefs that developed in me from that trauma. So there's almost like the experienced trauma at the hands of other people, and then the trauma I produced in my own life. And that led me on a long journey of brokenness, struggle, living what I call joyful from the smile forward, while battling monsters on the inside that were causing me to believe a real strong core belief that I was worthless and unlovable. And I started finding freedom. My wife and I went through an amazing journey of freedom, and we're fixing to celebrate 35 years.
Congratulations.
And blessings to her for putting up with me in the early years. And then a few years ago, I started meeting people that were talking the same talk. And I would say when we talked 2 years ago, I might not have been a complete soul on fire. I was a glowing ember, so I was beginning to get it. But since that time, I'd kept the promise that I made to God that if you help me through these struggles, you can have my story. Didn't know God was so into books because he held me to the fire on, I want you to share it with the world. And so I wrote a book. It was published February 22, so a year and 3 months ago. It's been an amazing journey. I've been wearing different hats for 17 years as a clinical therapist, a counselor, a life coach, mindset coach, which is pretty close to what I am now as a mindset and transformational coach because of the way I do things. And everybody's message morphs and grows. If we're not growing, we're dying.
Yeah.
So I've been growing, but through the experience of hearing clients being blessed and sharing their stories with the process I learned in my own journey, and I got to give God a strong co-author tag on this for my own journey that became the way I help people. I have not abandoned the process that I had 2 years ago at all. It's just that it's morphed and grown. And it's almost like the binoculars when you're focusing in, and I finally feel like I have clarity. And I feel like I've got a clarity now that I haven't had before. And it's morphing out into more than just helping trauma survivors, which is still the core of my passion because of my own story. But now I'm learning this process helps anybody with limiting beliefs or feeling stuck in life. Hence what we'll talk about at some point during the next hour, the epic life. That's not just a word. I always create, what are they, acrostics, to teach things. And so it's just a beautiful place I'm in right now. And I'm just thankful for the friends and family, thankful for the tribe of authors, coaches I have around the world that are connected to me. We're all a bunch of imperfect souls on fire, and helping each other light each other's light.
Oh, that's awesome. So why do you call yourself a soul on fire? What is the significance of that? And you said you were an ember, but now you're a soul on fire. So what's the
Yeah.
significance, and how did you become a soul on fire?
Well, I got to give credit to someone we both know for that phrase, soul on fire. My publisher, real good friend, and now employer, because I have a second side job working for my publisher, Igniting Souls. But that phrase is something Carrie Oberbrunner has coined for a long time. And when we met, he was talking about souls on fire, and I was talking about the inner light, and they kind of morphed. And the phrase that God gave me many years ago when I started my healing journey, that became kind of the mantra of my book. It's like the phrase was downloaded into my heart, but I grew into it. It's like getting some clothes handed down to you that are a little too big and you grow into them. So I grew into this phrase, which is simply, we carry all the light we will ever need to illuminate all the darkness we will ever face. Sometimes we just need help reconnecting to it. So we're all, and I won't get into beliefs here. I believe in God. I know you have a faith relationship, but we all have a core divine light. And those things we all desire in life, joy, peace, happiness, the things we all strive for, we're connected to them best and living them the richest when we're connected to that inner light, which is our true core self. These experiences we have and the crazy world we live in, especially post-COVID and all the political and social arenas in this country, we get off track and the brain hears all these things and we get stuck on certain things. And that phrase you used, we let limiting beliefs take root. And it's just such a dangerous thing. And that's why it's my passion to wake people up to what limiting beliefs do, both at a relational, emotional, spiritual level, but actually at a physiological level, how they rewire your brain and your core belief systems. And the reason that's dangerous is that's the place where we do everything. Whether we go to the gym or eat healthy or have an addiction, it's all rooted out of our core beliefs, that inner voice. And so, it's redefined how I see trauma, and I help people redefine what trauma is. And hence a lot of people that think they had no trauma in their life, once they understand the vision of it and what it really is, they're like, oh my gosh. And it's hard. It's hard to come to that term that you're in bondage to something from 3 years, 5 years, 30 years ago, but it's just truth, and when we face the truth, we realize that all the power we give those things, the limiting beliefs, the fear, the shame, those words, the power comes from us. We created it. We rewrote the beliefs during the experiences, and that's good news. That's not bad news, because we don't have to search the world for healing and freedom. We just have to search within ourselves.
So how do you define trauma? You said that you illuminate for people by defining trauma. How do you define trauma? I know how I define it. So
yeah, most clients I talk to, when I ask the question about trauma, 80% of them, this is a loose figure, I haven't done a real study, but 80% of them go, I really didn't have any trauma. And their thoughts are, trauma, I barely survived the Twin Towers falling down. I was sexually abused like Travis. That's what they define trauma. And the problem is, it's centered on an event. That's an event. And as tragic as it is, tragedy doesn't equate trauma at its root, because the real trauma, I was sexually abused by my biological father, and then for 3 years by a man in the neighborhood. Was that experience traumatic? Yes. But that's not what built the core trauma inside of me. It's the beliefs I developed out of that. And I was a kid, so I had to learn to forgive my child self and get free from that. But I wrote the best story I could. So when I was in the midst of the abuse and questioning, why am I doing this? Why don't I tell somebody? Why don't I say something? And I reckoned, I was sitting on a bicycle at age 7 one day. I reckoned I must just be a piece of trash. Simple words. But the phrase I use all the time, words create worlds. Words are powerful. Words spoke the universe into existence. Words create the reality we live, at least from our perspective.
Mhm.
Doesn't control reality out here, but it sure controls reality in here. And I know we'll talk about that more in a minute. So trauma is more about the story we write than the experience. Because at age 9.5, I stopped being sexually abused. The traumatic event stopped, but the trauma was just starting.
Right.
Because Travis had
Because
begun
what
to,
trauma is
yeah,
trauma is inside of the human,
right.
whereas the event is outside. And so the
Travis had
event
begun
is
to
not the
believe,
trauma.
yeah, Travis had begun to believe that he was worthless and unlovable. And I believe it. So words create worlds. So it affects my vision of things. You know, it's like I'm a country boy, so this analogy is funny, but it's like having a field of beautiful flowers, and one pile of calendar. And trauma rewrites the story where we're going to key in on the calendar and miss all the beautiful flowers. And so things happened in my life. I would always see that perspective. You know, a friend didn't ask me to come over and play. I'm worthless and unlovable. Who would want to be my friend? And it just gets written deeper and deeper and deeper. And
Yeah.
the way the brain works is we all have that core little, I call it the little guy at the desk in the middle of our brain, writing everything,
That's
every
an
thought,
image.
feeling.
That's a little
Yeah,
image to have a little guy at the desk.
yeah.
I could see a cartoon image of that.
He's
A little guy at a
writing
desk.
everything we think, feel. And that's why trauma is so powerful, because as adults, we have experiences, and we could talk hours for this, but we have an experience, a marriage couple, a father, a mother, or within ourselves, and it stirs an emotion and a feeling. Now, we don't think it consciously, but subconsciously, the brain goes, oh, we've got 10 more thoughts and feelings exactly like that. And they're like open tabs on a desktop, and the brain wants to work very economical. So when we face that feeling or emotion, the brain says, let's line them all up. Maybe he's going to deal with them all. And so it's why we have little things that happen in relationships that become implosive fights. We're dealing with the emotion and feelings in here, not just the one thing, and that's what trauma does. It rewrites our story. It hacks our core belief systems. Carrie Oberberner, my friend, wrote a whole book about our brains becoming unhackable, but first, how they get hacked by reality around us.
Yeah.
And one of the main things that hacks our brain is ourself. And that's a painful thing to come to realize, but it's beautiful, because now I got one place to go to confront that and
Well,
change
the
it.
power there is you can do something about it. If
Absolutely.
we'll see and recognize and make ourselves aware of what is going on, the things that we believe, how we're talking to ourselves in our head, what story we're writing. If we'll own that,
Yeah,
like in Unhackable, own it, then we can rewrite a new story, like Brene
yeah,
Brown says.
absolutely. And we're the center character in that story. So if we're on one path, the beautiful thing is, as helpless as we feel, we can recreate the reality that we're walking in, and create a new way. And that's what
Yeah.
I do with clients all the time. It's what I did myself, with my wife's help, with the good Lord's help, with some other professionals' help. Because after more than 3 decades, I uttered that word that is hard for all of us and nearly impossible for men: help,
Mhm.
help. And that was when my life began to change, when I said that one word.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
In these last 2 years, you touched a little bit on your process. Let's talk about your two processes and how you called it one thing, now you're calling it another, and how
Yeah.
they're very similar anyways, but unpack
Yeah.
that for
Yeah.
us.
It's just that clarity and maturity I've gained in it, I guess. When I first started it really didn't have a name. It's just that the 16 chapters in my book, We Are All Fireflies, while it's told in the context of my story, the further you go through the book, the further you get away from my story, which is mostly centered in section 1. And when you get into the healing and growth, section 2 and 3, it morphs more into a process for all of us. And those 16 chapters became the 16 steps that I use to work with people. And at its core, I still use those 16 steps, 4 of which are focused on freedom, bondage to freedom, 4 of which are focused on, now let's assess the system that was in bondage, self, for so long, and heal the core systems, 4 of them. And then let's adopt these 8 healthy mindsets. So I still at the root still use that process. I still have clients that purchase a 16-week process.
Mhm.
But what I've come to learn, and something that they can carry with them more tangibly, and oddly enough, I don't know what people think about visions and divine downloads and all that, but I was sitting right here in this office having a moment, listening to some very ethereal music that gets my ADHD brain focused. And I said, it's like what we're all seeking is this epic life. And I know epic is sometimes overused and it's used in fantasy fiction and all this, but we really are all created for an epic life. It doesn't mean we're going to slay dragons and overcome kingdoms like in the stories.
Right.
Epic life could look real simple on the outside. So I started thinking, well, why am I on that word? Because I need to have a reason, because my wordsmith daughter is going to challenge me about overusing the word epic if I don't have a real reason. And because my brain being ADHD, I think in acrostics and flow, it just downloaded in me. I said, really what I do in this 16-step process is I teach people to be in control of the process of living encouraged and living purposed and living intentional and living connected.
Mhm.
And every time I think of something like that, I challenge myself and go, okay, where are the holes in this? Maybe I was just giddy and thought something up. But as I looked at the 16-stage process and I looked at my own life journey, all of it fit in those 4 core things. Now they all have 4 to 8 things underneath them on how to get to that point of living an encouraged life and a purposed life, an intentional life, and a connected life. So it's like my book, my original process fits there, but it's just a more beautiful package with a bow on it, and it makes sense. And it's something, once you grow through those mindsets and adopt them in that free and healthy brain, this is something you can carry with you for life and remind yourself and write on the mirror and I don't know, get a tattoo, whatever you do, to remind yourself that if
Yeah.
I can master just these 4 things at the core of who I am, I can live this epic life story.
Mhm.
And I believe now the good Lord can do something tomorrow, but I believe this is the thing I will hang my hat on for the rest of my days,
Mm.
because it just brings me joy, almost to tears, to see people move out of bondage and into freedom and realize, while the process is never flawless and perfect, because none of us are perfect, we're still
Right.
going to have bumps, but that we can all reach a free and healed place that when the bumps hit, they have no control to go back and plant any of these deep core limiting beliefs in us. We can hit them head on.
Yeah.
I call it meeting it out in the street before it knocks on the door and moves into my house. And we can do that. We can't stop them from coming, because the world's a crazy place, and our
Mhm.
thoughts get crazy sometimes when we're hungry or tired or, stressed. But we have a system in place that we manage it.
Mhm.
We keep it at bay.
Yeah. I
So
love that epic. I do see how people overuse it or can, but people also say that trying to find your purpose is overused. So I was changing that.
yeah,
It's like, well, it's all about, it has to fit what you're doing. I
yeah,
talk about people embracing their God-given greatness, which may sound bizarre to some people, but then I talk about how it doesn't have to be, slaying dragons, like how you put it. It doesn't have to be this purpose that, you take over the world or some whatever humongous thing you got in your head that then
yeah,
you're intimidated by, and then you don't want to do it because it's too big, and then you're
yeah,
just sitting, and eating chips on the sofa. It's like, but it's
yeah.
it's living a free life. It's living a life you're created for. It's finding
That's
the
the key.
joy in your own life.
Yeah,
And your greatness can be as simple as being an encourager to someone else. I tell the story about a friend of mine who, she's no longer with us. She's with the Lord now, but she could give hugs that could just melt away whatever's going on in your life. I think that's a gift. And
yeah,
so that's when people give their gifts to the world like that, then they're embracing their greatness. They're living an epic life because they are
absolutely.
giving what they are created for back into the world.
And it's rooted in here. In the 3rd section of my book, in one of the chapters, I talk about one of the happiest men I've ever met in the city I live in, and we've been here 28 years now. And to this day, and I think he's probably passed on now because he was older, but one of the happiest men I ever met in about 2007 was a sanitation worker in the poorest area of our city on a hot August morning where it was already 95 degrees. And I'm walking down the street looking for houses to paint and renovate for little elderly people and a nonprofit I was working with. And I heard this whistling like a Disney movie one block over. And this story is in the book, a short version, but I ran over because I don't know a stranger. I said, I got to ask him, where is this whistling coming from? Well, I just thought it was somebody in their yard or something, but it was the sanitation worker because I heard the garbage truck. And I said, sir, I got to ask you, why are you so happy? Because it is hot and humid. You can cut the air with a knife. This trash truck stinks. And, a real quick sentence, he looked at me. He spoke for about 30 minutes with me, and I walked with him while they did trash. He goes, I got a little old house. It ain't much, but it's paid off. And I got a sweet little wife at home that I'm growing old with. And I may not look like much hauling people's garbage, but I walk up and down these streets. And some days me and the postman might be the only person that some of these elderly and shut-ins see. And I want them to know some of the joy I have inside me. That man was living an epic life story.
Yes. He was
Although by
embracing his
culture
greatness,
standards, he's
living
at the
epically.
bottom.
Yes.
Yeah. Now the
Yeah.
world looks at it and goes, well, where did he miss out in life? He's poor, he's hauling trash, but
No.
wrong standard.
Right. It's all about soul joy and living your best life. No, we can't be each other. There's only one of us,
Yeah.
We can't be all those other people that people tend to compare themselves with. No, embracing who you are. That's a beautiful story. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah. It's in the book. They can get the book.
Well, tell us about your book. That's where I was going to go next. Tell us about
Well,
your
yeah,
book.
the original book, because book 2 is already in my head and will be worked on later this year. But book 1 is We Are All Fireflies, Finding Your Light in the Darkness. So it uses the core of my story because, like I said, I'm not going to try to come at you as a brain expert with my psychology masters. I'm going to come at you from the point of view where I'm most expert, my story.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a front row seat. I say this in the introduction. I've had a front row seat to the victories and the high spots and the darkest moments and the poorest choices. And out of it is who I am today. It's not a perfect journey, but none are in our human life. Right. And so that story starts out heavily talking about my story, but also instantly talking about, hey, this isn't a magic formula, but here's the 4 steps I did to move from bondage to freedom. And then it becomes more about you, the reader, as we progress up to chapter 4 and move into section 2 and 3. Section 2 is about healing. And I've got 4 systems. This is just how God grew me. It's not all inclusive, but it is all inclusive in the body, because if we address our vision, our voice, our velocity, that's how we move through life. I'm an old physics nerd. And our value, if we address those 4 areas and understand how that bondage may have hindered these, we can repair them. It's kind of like, yes, we're still going through life. We survived the bondage, but it's like owning a car that's still getting us to work every day. But when we decide to go on a big family vacation, we go to the shop and we get it checked out and we change the oil and check the tires and we make sure everything is at its optimal place. Right. And that's what we do in this healing process, because we don't want to build on a weak foundation. And section 3 of the book is about building a foundation. I've got 8 core mindsets, easy words to remember, that become the crux of this epic life story. The whole process fits it, but these 8 things are the keys that lock everything in together. And it's the fun part.
Yeah, healing, it's good to be healed. I like being healed.
Yeah. And so book 2 is going to follow that, and tell this story of how to live your epic life story, but without Travis's story. It's about you, the reader, whoever picks up the book, listens to the audio book. When it comes out, this will be about, here is how you can find your epic life story. And they can read the book. There'll be a course with it. They can get a self-paced course. They can work with me one-on-one, whatever depth they need to discover what their epic life story is, because that's what I want to do. And, maybe I have lofty goals because Carrie Oberburner is my friend, but, in my lifetime, I'd like to know that my story impacted 1,000,000 souls.
Yeah.
Because exponentially, we don't even know what that could do.
Amen. I really like that. When I was in Fire Ring, we were did a vision board with Nikki, and I am coming up on my goal that I set that first year in Fire Ring. And it's for me to reach 1,000,000 souls with my story by my birthday this year.
Oh, nice.
So
Very
I'm getting there. I have 100 and something more thousand people to reach. I'm over 800,000 people I've reached. So
That's good.
I understand and I cheer you on. 1,000,000 people. Yes. It's like, because
Yeah.
there's billions of people on the planet. And when you think of that, 1,000,000 isn't that many.
No, but it can sure spark a fire.
Yes.
And when we hit 1,000,000, I guess we'll go for 10,000,000.
There you go. I agree.
As long as we're living our story.
Yeah, and your purpose through all of this has always been the same, to help people with their limiting beliefs. And I want to say this for our listeners, because limiting beliefs is another term we hear a lot. And people can trip over that. Sometimes when something is familiar, we trip over it. We stop listening to it. I want to call it out what they are. Limiting beliefs, they're lies. We're believing lies about ourselves. I have believed lies about me. That's part of the subtitle of my first book, is lies. And when you were called yourself worthless, Travis, that was not the truth. That was a lie, but it was limiting you. So limiting beliefs is still true, but I just want to call a spade a spade. Those limiting beliefs are lies. And so we replace them with the truth. So let's talk about your core beliefs. You were telling me about them before, the desired belief, the believed, and the difference between the desired and the believed, and expound on that for us about that.
I guess like almost anybody that gets an upper level degree, like a master's or a doctorate, and I've got a master's in psychology, you learn all the stuff they tell you to learn that you're paying $1 million for, but you usually key in on something. And I guess because of my trauma story, and I was not yet free from my trauma story when I went to grad school, I was living under the belief that it was just my job to use my brokenness to help others, but I didn't deserve to be helped. But I really keyed in on how the brain worked. And so I got what limited teaching in grad school, because they have to teach you everything. And then postgraduate, I just went on this quest. I got certified in some trauma recovery processes. I started learning about how the brain works. And I'm not a PhD and I'm not an expert on the brain, but I do know a lot about how it works and how neural pathways work, and what we've learned the last 30, 35 years, especially in neuroplasticity, how our whole life till the day we breathe our last, we can rewire our own brain. We can unwire the bad places and rewire new things. And that's what my 8 core mindsets are about. But these core beliefs, we have experiences up here. We say things, do things, things are done to us and said to us. They go into our consciousness, cross the barrier into our subconsciousness. We hold them as memories and experiences, and they create core beliefs, and that becomes our operating system. If we use a computer for an example, we operate out of our core beliefs in God, in healthy eating, in exercising, in addictions, and in lies, limiting beliefs. And the thing is, the good ones rest right under the level of the subconscious, and they're easy to recall. So when I'm helping clients, I say, look, no matter what past you've had, if I said, tell me a favorite childhood Christmas memory, almost everybody can just dip right into the subconscious. Oh yeah, when I was 7 and I got that bike. But when I ask them, tell me about one of your most painful experiences, tell me what you fear most in life, those memories and experiences are heavy. So they go to the bottom of the subconscious. They're hard to recall, but they're still affecting and creating these core beliefs, and we operate out of those. And here's the problem, and there's a term in psychology, not really overused because it's used in the real way it's supposed to most of the time, but it's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive just means mind or thought. Dissonance means disruption. And what I learned in my process, my verbiage that I use, is when we have these painful experiences that we don't process, that create these open tabs of lies on the desktop of ourself, our reality splits, and we have our believed reality and our desired reality. Now, our desired reality is tied to who we really are. I want love and joy and peace the way God wired me. I want a family, and I want to love people and be loved. I want to experience good things, and that's good. But what happens is these hacked beliefs or limiting beliefs create this other system over here of believed reality. I want this great life, but I'm worthless. I want my wife and kids to be happy, but I'm unlovable. I'm not enough. I'm a failure. And in between that chasm, and the greater it is, the greater the words pull that chasm away, the more cognitive dissonance you have, because you're living out of the pursuit of your desired reality while constantly being held back by this believed reality. So it's why I quit the highest paying job I've ever had in my life. It's why I went to the Army and got out early. I'm living these dreams. I'm living the things me and my wife wanted to experience. But every time I get to an apex or a pinnacle, these hacked beliefs over here, this believed reality, you really think you can handle this new job making this much money? You're in charge of 26 counties where you live. You're going to fail miserably. They're going to find out you're worthless, and they're going to fire you. And so what does the monster in my head, it's what I call it in my book, do? It says, yeah, you better be in control of this. You better just exit before somebody exits you. And there's the struggle. And I meet so many people, whether they really never have had trauma or whether they don't understand that they have, because it can be birthed by one little experience, one word or sentence. I meet tons of people that come to me and say, well, I don't need trauma work, but my marriage is falling apart. And we start unpacking the brain operation, and we all of a sudden have this picture painted. You have all this desired reality you want to live, but what are you doing with this over here? And most of the time it's, I don't know. I don't like thinking about stuff like that. I don't like thinking about the painful things. You made me bring them up and think about them. I try to push those down. I leave them behind, and we give into this American culture view, especially for us men. Get over it. Don't use that F word. Don't talk about your feelings. That was in the past. You can't go back and change it. And please, listener, if you hear that advice, run. Because, yeah, you can't go back and change it. You can't relive it, but you can change the story you're living now, and we have to own it. I'll say it the clean PG way, but I had a client corner me one time, and he said, you need to tell me in one sentence what you're going to do to help me in my marriage, and don't give me all that psychobabble that they taught you. I said, well, here's what I'm going to help you do. I'm going to help you own your crap and speak your truth. That's it. And what I was really saying to him that he didn't want to hear, I'm going to help you identify your cognitive dissonance, because you have this desired reality for yourself and this believed reality for yourself because of what you experienced growing up with the father you had that you've already told me about. But see, I couldn't tell him all that instantly. He would have ran.
Right.
But we unpacked it, and it took a while. And he came to like the process, even though he said he was there for one visit, and that's the only chance I had. And it wasn't because of the power of what I did for him and said. I'm a flawed individual that's been down the road he's been down. It's because he began to see and experience the full potential of who he could be. He began to believe, maybe I can live an epic life.
Yeah.
Because
I want
it's
to circle
not
back to something you mentioned, and for our listeners to not miss it, because it really hit me, and I think the world needs to hear this. You called feelings the F word. I love that, because people do. They think about that in certain ways. It's the F word, but they think of the other F word. But we need to deal with the feelings. We need to understand our feelings. We need to own them. And certain aspects of trauma, people don't even know what feelings are, what to call them. I mean, there's a thing called alexithymia. They can't identify them. So feelings, call them the F word if you want, please, listener, but lean into them, because they're messengers, and they have a message to tell you, and you will get where you need to go if you will listen and keep moving.
Yeah. And it's not just us men. The culture teaches us men not to talk about our feelings. But then most women are God wired to readily embrace their feelings. But who do they often go to? A father, a husband, who doesn't have the brain bandwidth. Because let's be honest, guys, I'm a man, so I can say this: we only like to confront things that we can see a fix for. And a lot of times when our spouse or someone in our life or a daughter starts talking about feelings and all this, we either open our mouth and shout fixes when they're not needing or wanting any. They just want to be heard. Or we're saying the wrong things, because we don't have to have a fix for everything. Or what I teach husbands, okay, if you're a man and you're wired to be a fixer, let's embrace that. Let's lean into it. I'm going to give you the one fix that will fix 90% of what your wife or mother or daughter comes to you with. And they're already like, okay, I'm a fixer. What is it? I said 90% of the time, your spouse, your wife, your mother wants to share her feelings. Your fix is just to listen well.
Yeah.
And then I usually look at the wife and say, if you want more from him, don't believe that Hollywood lie that, well, if he gets me, he'll just know what I need. No, you tell him, you share your feelings. And if you're wanting more, you look at him and say, will you tell me what your thoughts are on this?
Mhm.
You have
Yeah.
to communicate. Don't give into that stuff where we should know each other. We're
Yeah.
growing and dynamic. We constantly spend our life getting to know one another,
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it is a hard thing for all of us. And, I guess there's kind of two F words that really make us stumble, especially people with trauma backgrounds, but really every relationship struggle I see is either steeped in a misunderstanding or a mishandling of their feelings and a misunderstanding or mishandling of their fears.
Mm.
And that one's such an epic one, in not a good way, that it's the first thing I do on the very first visit with people. And every now and then I want to scare somebody away, because before they leave my first visit on Zoom or in person, I say, I got a question for you. And if you don't know, let's put I don't know as a temporary answer, and then we'll find the answer together. But I've learned this is a key answer to pursue what you're looking for, the freedom, healing, and growth. And it's, what do you fear most in life? Because like that famous quote, who I can't remember who said it, almost everything we seek is on the other side of fear.
Mm.
And it's almost 100% true for trauma survivors.
Wow.
Fear. But if we'll face it, because if we'll realize the powerlessness we feel in the face of fear is just it's a construct, because we created the fear out of our story about the experience. And the silly analogy I use and I tell this on my son, and he knows I use this, he's always grown up deathly afraid of spiders. And I said, you don't fear spiders. And he's like, oh yeah, I do. I said, no, you fear the fear of spiders because of the story you began writing as a little kid, probably when a granddaddy longlegs crawled upon you and startled you. And you began writing this story that it's going to grow 6-foot fangs and it's going to eat my face off and kill me. And just like that trauma narrative, you've written this narrative that you've come to believe, and now you're deathly afraid of these spiders, who generally don't want to be around you and don't want to hurt you, So it's the fear of the experience. It's the fear of the fear, and we created it. And when we understand that, all the power lies within us.
Yeah.
It's like we've been spending a lifetime with a fire hose in our hand to put the fire out, and the house is on fire, but we're watering down the woods next to it. And this process just teaches us that you have the right and the need and the power to just scoot that fire hose over.
Yeah.
And you can put it out, And that's what I tell
Right.
my
You
wife.
have the
It's not
right
me
to
that
do
does
that.
it for
Yes.
you. It is you that does it.
Yeah.
I just ask better questions because I've been there and I've done this a lot.
Yeah. They have the right to do that. That's empowering to them.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Well, this leads right into my other question I wanted to ask you about that you put in your paperwork. You say that vulnerability is a superpower. Will you unpack that? What do you mean? How is vulnerability a superpower?
And I say that from the point of view of a man, but it fits us all. And I, I'm more expert as a man. I don't think I'll ever fully understand women, but I'm learning. My wife is teaching me. But culture teaches us that vulnerability is to be feared and avoided. And I can't tell you how many times I bring that up to husbands. If I mess up and say that statement before I unpack it, they're like, oh, no, it's not. No, I can't be vulnerable. I got to take care of my family, and I got to be this, and I got to be this, and I got to be this. And I'm like, okay, vulnerability is a weakness on the battlefield. If you're in the military, or if there's a band of thieves attacking your family, vulnerability is a weakness. If you're in the sports arena, vulnerability is a weakness. You're going to die on the battlefield or you're going to lose the game. But in life, vulnerability is a superpower because it puts us in the reality of understanding who we are and owning that, flaws and all. It's being real with self so that we can be real with God, so that we can be real with others. And someone challenged me on that once and said, well, you got it out of order. We should be real and vulnerable with God first. And I said, well, I'm a student of the brain and I'm a believer too. And I don't think you can tap into the power of being vulnerable to God until you have a better understanding of self.
Yes.
So we have to learn to be vulnerable with self. That's that own my crap and speak my truth, as painful as it is. And just owning the fact that, look, we're all flawed and imperfect, and that doesn't excuse it. It's reality. In real life, with each other, with all the Bible stories you read, God didn't use a single perfect person except his son. Peter and David and all of them, they were flawed as all get out.
Yeah.
But they reached a point in their story that they owned their crap and embraced their truth and grew. And they did it by being vulnerable. Psalms 52 or 53, I think, David is as vulnerable as it gets. My God, please cleanse my soul and my heart. I have failed you. That's my wording of it. Peter has that moment, what have I done? All of us. That's the moment we need. It's the transitionary moment where we look down and either our own life choices or our trauma, have taken what I call with clients life's toolbox that's full of these beautiful, shiny tools that gives us joy, peace, love, and hope, and all those fruits of the spirit. And we look down, and because of the trauma or our own choices or bad decisions or whatever, we got a rusty old toolbox and we kick it open, and all we got to do life with is a broke hammer or used roll of duct tape. And vulnerability is saying, this stinks, but every journey has to have a starting point, and here's where I start. I'm going to reclaim my shiny tools.
Yeah. I love how you brought up the vulnerability with the people who God used in the Bible. Recently, I was reminded of what happened with Peter. He denied Jesus because I was doing something in Luke, and it talks about if you deny me before, people, I'll deny you before the angels. And I just stopped there and thought about Peter. Because years ago, when I was steeped in my religious trauma, I was terrified of that. Oh my goodness, if I do any of these things, every 5 minutes I was going to hell. I was just terrified all the time. And so I read that and I remembered being afraid of that before. But my first thought was like, I'm not quite sure what Jesus was talking about. The point he talked about the Pharisees there, but what I'm honing in on here is Peter did that. And what did Jesus do? He came and he restored him. And Peter was vulnerable at that time because Jesus says, Peter, do you, love me? Do you love me like a friend? And he's like, Lord. It's almost like I feel that's like, you know better than I know. And he asked him again, and then again, and he just is like, God, I thought I knew. Obviously, I thought I knew, and I don't know, but you did, and I'm doing the best I know, and this is all I got.
Yeah. And for believers trying to pursue this epic life story, that's a key point, because what you said in a nutshell is the difference between religion and relationship.
Yeah.
And religion says, focus on the rules, keep the rules. That's all well and fine to try to do it. God gave us 10 commandments way back there. And by Jesus's day, the Pharisees had like 635 rules because they kept having to wrap new rules around the ones they couldn't keep. And that doesn't mean just live willy-nilly and make your mistakes. It's a matter of the heart.
Yes.
It's why a murderer and an adulterer is not glorified in his choices, but he's glorified in God's view of him, who sees that he's a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
And that was one of the key places of my turning point with God, because I had a cursing, yelling, screaming moment on a rock on the side of a mountain in Tennessee. And I asked myself that core question. I had never been asked by anybody else, but I was like, what are you so many colorful words afraid of? And in the quietness of the woods, because it was just me, I broke down in tears. I broke in half in vulnerability. I'm just afraid that I'm unworthy and unlovable and nothing can fix me. Now, God didn't say, well, yay for you for all those mistakes and bad things you did and people you hurt. I'm going to just overlook it. He looked at the heart and said, buddy, that's where I needed you to be. I got you.
Yeah.
That was the answer to my yelling and screaming to the woods of, why did you let me be sexually abused? Why didn't you help me here? What about that year before I met my wife where I had every opportunity to heal and missed it? Why? And he said, I was always right there. I was just waiting you to get to this point.
Yeah.
And it's what I do with couples, whether they're believers or not. Get to this point with self.
Mm-hmm.
I'm flawed and imperfect, but I do have, even as an unbeliever, they've got the divine spark in them too. God doesn't FedEx it to us when we start pursuing him. He creates us with it.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to reach a point in life where we make a willful choice to connect to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We have to recognize, humanity has to recognize that we are flawed. No one's
Yeah.
perfect. I was talking with someone recently about water. Water is H2O. If you take one of the hydrogens away, it's not water anymore.
Right.
God created us perfect, and we're not perfect. I don't care how much you're not perfect. You're either perfect or not. It's either water or it's not. And
Yeah.
so we're not perfect. It doesn't matter. And Jesus came and he did all the perfect for us. Here, I got perfect for you. Are you ready to trade your imperfect? Own that you actually have that thing, and I'll give you my perfect.
Yeah. He's the other oxygen molecule.
Yes. Yep. Perfect. Yeah. So
Yeah.
is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we share, something you want to make sure the listeners know?
I tend, nobody's called me this, but I usually call myself a broken record at this point. But anytime I do a podcast or an interview, or when Carrie did my live stream launch, because not only is my book out, since you and I have talked, my audiobook came out a month and a half ago. So if
So
you'd like to read, you can listen to my country bumpkin Matthew McConaughey sounding voice. But here's what I leave everybody with. You know what? Almost all of us, when rightly understood, have had some level of trauma, pain, or unprocessed experiences.
Mhm.
And we just need to own the fact that if we have blank in life, stress, anxiety, struggle in my marriage, struggle in my career pursuits, we can manage those surface issues. We can medicate them. We can avoid them. Or we can say, you know what? Life is too short. Everything has a root. And when the garden grows full of weeds, we don't mow the weeds down.
Yeah.
We get in there and pull them up by the root. And
Mhm.
so if I want this epic life for myself, I'm going to go talk to somebody that's going to help me go below the surface of the stress and the anxiety and the struggling relationships and find the core. And we all have the power to find the roots, to upend the lies, to overcome the limiting beliefs. And that's that mantra that I'll probably have on my tombstone, is that we carry all the light we will ever need to illuminate all the darkness we will ever face.
Mhm.
Vulnerability is the fact that sometimes we just need help reconnecting to it.
Amen. We all need help.
Yeah.
We all need help. We need to cry out for help. Yes.
Yeah.
So how can people connect with you if they want to do coaching with you and they want to get a copy of your book? How can people
Yeah.
connect with you?
Well, I have a website, all being imperfect. I'll say to the listener, if you visit my website, come back after June 10th, because I'm fixing to revamp it. And hopefully part of that will be launching a membership community where we can stay in touch daily. I'll give a real low entry point cost with a high value content. I'm going to create a course for book one before I launch into book two, but it's travismwhite.com. Most of my social media is Travis M. White Coach, except for Facebook, which my wife, who coaches with me, that's her portal. So we share that. So it's traviswhite.regenea White, Regenea. But if you type my name in, you'll find it. But just go to travismwhite.com and look over the under construction part and we'll get there. And I'd love to help by Zoom, by the future courses, the membership community I'm going to create, or one-on-one. I have a bandwidth and I try to work with as many clients as I can one-on-one.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, this was amazing, Travis. We talked about so much more than we did the first time. And I
Yeah.
hear the growth in you. I remember when I talked to you the first time, I was probably a little timid's probably not the right word, but something like that, just green.
Yeah.
And you were a little held back also because you were
Yeah.
still in process. And I hear the boldness in you, and I hear that, and I just want to celebrate that with you.
Thank
Just
you.
your journey that you have, all the things that you have accomplished in the last 2 years. Just thank you for sharing that with us today.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me share that.
Oh, my pleasure. And my listeners, thank you for being here with us today. And as always, mwah, I love you. Till next time.